What's up guys? Today's Thursday, and on Thursday I want to do mixing videos. So I was messing around with this dance track and I came across an interesting problem. The problem I was having was that a kick drum was getting in the way or masking the syncopated percussion, in particular this hi-hat that was really important to the section. It just wasn't a rhythmical interaction between the two parts. That was one problem. Another problem was that the kick was somehow darkening the hi-hat a little bit. The way that I ended up solving the problem is I applied compression to a kick-snare bus, and it's compressing the sustain on both the kick and the snare, which is allowing the hi-hat to breathe, and the interaction between the kick, snare, and the hi-hat is much more rhythmical. So this is just the kick, snare, hi-hat before the bus processing. So that was before and after. Two things that I'm hearing. First, by compressing the sustain of the kick, what happens is it creates a longer period before the kick hits and the hi-hat. It creates a feeling of suspension or anticipation, which is really what swing is. You know, swing is so important to dance music. By compressing the sustain, it makes it feel like the hi-hat breathes more. So let me go ahead and play that one more time, see if you guys are hearing what I'm hearing. To my ears, that sounds way better. So let me play this in context, before and after, and then we'll kind of go into the settings. So let me talk about the approach really quick. If you want to drop the sustain of something, you could easily do that by just opening up a transient designer, like this Transient Master by Native Instruments. You could just take the sustain away. I took it away 50%. Let's see what that sounds like. While it improves it, it doesn't improve it in the way that my mind is hearing it. And so what I need to do is I needed to get a little bit more customization. My favorite plugin to deal with compressing sustain on something is the RCompressor. The reason being is that they have this little switch here called electro opto. And what electro opto does is that it messes around with how quickly the release goes back to 0 dB. Now obviously you set a release time. When you set a release time though, that doesn't necessarily mean that the release goes back to 0 gain reduction in a linear fashion. What electro does is that as the release approaches 0 gain reduction, it moves quicker to 0 gain reduction. And on the opto setting, as the release approaches 0 gain reduction, it slows down as it approaches 0 gain reduction. It changes the vibe of the release. Now in dance music, that is so important. The vibe of the release is what sidechaining is. Sidechaining is literally listening to release times. That's literally what sidechaining is. You're just listening to the release of something going back to 0 gain reduction. And so when you have tools like the LFO tool, let me pull the LFO tool up really quick. With the LFO tool, when you're moving this around, you're literally changing the vibe of how the sound approaches zero gain reduction. So in this case, you see that as it approaches zero, it gets faster. But if we're going to move this little knob over here, you see that as it approaches zero gain reduction, it slows down compared to this part. And so that's kind of what's going on in the RCompressor, except you don't have as much control over it as you do in the LFO tool. But for this, just going back and forth between the opto and electro gives me enough flavors to figure out which one is going to work. And so let me show you how I'd go about setting this up. Let me just start over from scratch here, turn on manual release. I'm going to turn off warm because the difference between warm and smooth is that smooth tries to emulate the original sound as much as possible. Warm adds some coloration. I don't feel like I need coloration with this kick right now. First thing I'm going to do is pull the threshold way down, pull the ratio down a little bit, and then I'm going to mess around with the attack because I want to figure out how much of the attack I want to let through and how much after the attack I want to compress. All right, so right around 306, that sounds pretty good to me. I'm just getting that click of the kick, and when you listen, I could hear the syncopated hi-hats coming through better, obviously. And so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set the release time. Okay, so that sounds pretty punchy to me, but right now I am on opto. Let's switch over to electro. All right, so I'll switch them back and forth there, and actually I like the vicinity of this release time for both. But what the electro is doing for me is it feels like at the end of the kick is almost like swooping into the syncopated hi-hats. With the opto, it's not doing that for me. It feels too static. It feels like it just kind of like duh, duh, duh. With the electro, it feels like duh, duh, duh. Duh. It just feels like it flows. There's a flowness to it. I know flowness isn't a word. Get over it. So let's check that out. See if you guys can hear that. Last thing is that I'm just going to pull up the threshold. You know, we don't need to compress it like a mother. So I'm just gonna cut about 2 to 3 dB. And so that's pretty much going to do it for this video. I'm going to play through this one more time, but before that, if this is your first time to this channel, I'd love for you to subscribe. I do weekly songwriting, production, and mixing videos. Songwriting on Tuesday, production on Wednesday, and mixing on Thursday. So if that interests you, please subscribe. And to all of my subscribers out there watching, thanks so much for watching, guys.
Peace.